Welcome to Beyond Belief, where we cover all of the events involving Toronto's favorite Suns, the Toronto Maple Leafs, with your hosts, Adam and Donnie.
Welcome to the first episode of Beyond Belief, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast and vidcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is I guess for the purpose of this show, we'll call you the Leaf enthusiast, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
What's up, everyone? It is Donnie, and welcome to the very first episode of Beyond Belief.
Now, if he's the Leaf enthusiast, I'm the Leaf. I guess I'd be the Leaf fanatic. I guess that's what we're doing here. Listen, at some point through the course of the future episodes and upcoming season, there may be a good chance, and here's a Batman reference for everybody, that I will be recording my portion of the show from Arkham Asylum. So let's be on commission. So we'll see. And maybe I'll have an appointment with Dr. Harleen Quinzel. That would be nice. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I've always wanted to do a Leaf podcast. It's been something that's been on my to-do list for a while. And the reason I wanted to record one and have Donnie be the co-host is because Donnie and I come from very different perspectives of being a Leaf fan. So we're going to talk about our history with this, how can I phrase it? Beloved but accursed franchise. And that's how we're going to start the show. And then we're going to talk about, then we'll take a little break. And then on the other side of the break, we'll talk about the season that was and what we're looking forward ahead in terms of the off season and then going into the upcoming season. So that's the plan for the first episode. So Donnie, since you're the relative newer fan to this team, I will let you start. How did you become a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I'm honored to be part of this because I did not grow up with hockey as something that was readily available to me. I'm in a small area in the South. Currently, I live in Virginia, and hockey is not something that a lot of people watch. And when I have run into hockey fans, it's various scattered teams. And 2014, it was very interesting. The very end of 2013, I came across a show on HBO called The Road to the NHL Winter Classic.
Mm.
And I just so happened to start watching. It was just by chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that I don't root for geography. I'm not somebody who's always like, I'm going to root for the home team. I root for teams who give me a reason to be excited.
Okay.
And so I decided to watch that series and then watch the game, which was the culmination of the series.
Sure.
And that was the Leafs against the Detroit Red Wings. Mm-hmm. And it ended in, the regulation ended in a tie. It was a 2-2 tie with the Red Wings. And they went to a shootout. And I got to see the excitement of a shootout. And that game ended with Tyler Bozak scoring on Jimmy Howard. And there was so much elation in that moment that I was instantly transfixed. And I always say, you go back to those magical moments in your life when something's introduced to you and it's going to be a big part of your life. In that moment, I knew that I was going to be a Maple Leafs fan, despite the fact that, I've never been to Canada, although I plan to come see you someday.
Yes, sir. That's a good idea.
And it was such a cool experience. And I've done all that I can with the resources I have to learn about the history of the Leafs, their various rivalries, and all of the championships that they had as part of the original six. And I really have a lot of admiration for the game of hockey and the type of athlete who played this game, with the exception of Sam Bennett and a few others.
I'm going to stay side here in the off season. Then
we'll get to that in a minute.
I'll do the biggest heel turn you'll ever see in your life.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I really enjoy watching this game. It's so fast, it's so exciting, and Leafs Nation. Even though, again, I don't live in an area where I encounter Leafs fans very often at all, but the history there and the amount of enthusiasm that the fans have, despite the fact that we're now over 50 years from winning a championship, it's just I know. you know but it's just a magical feeling to be a part of this tradition, and to hope that one day we do get that championship that eventually adds to the 13 that the Leafs currently have.
It would be nice. That's the hope, and hopefully it's at some point to where I'm still of sound mind, and I can still see and I can still hear. That would be nice. Um,
I thought to myself once, I was like, it would have been cool to have been, alive in the 1940s when they were winning all those championships. But then again, I thought, I was like, well, no, I would have been fighting in World War II instead, and I wouldn't have got to see it. But anyway,
yeah,
even
yes,
if I made it back home.
yeah, exactly. So just before I get to my origin story with this team, and it may soon become a villain origin story if things keep going the way they're going. But you mentioned the Winter Classic game of
Yes.
that year. I remember I was on a trip to Italy to visit my grandmother and my aunts and uncles. And I, so the time difference in Italy is 6 hours.
Okay.
So the game starts at like 7:30, 8 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
Toronto time. So it's about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, Italy time. Well, here's me in the room that I was in with my headphones, the lights are off, I got the laptop open, and I'm streaming this game. And all the while trying not when the Leafs score, trying not to scream or cheer because there are other people in
Trying to sleep in the hotel.
adjacent rooms trying to sleep. Well, it was my grandmother's house, so it wasn't a big deal. But
Oh, your grandmother's house. Okay.
yeah, so you don't want to wake people up. But yeah, so you can imagine the amount of biting my lip trying not to scream. So I
That
remember that
shootout
game.
was tense, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah, well, it was. I am not a fan. I mean, the shootout is exciting, but as a way to lose a game, it sucks. But I digress.
And if I remember, they actually had the lead, and
Of course
Detroit
they did.
scored with like
Of
5.5 minutes left, and
course they did, because
yeah.
the Leafs are going to leave. But I digress. So I remember that game well, and that's the context of where I was. Now, based on everything you said, you willingly chose to be a fan of this team and to put yourself in this situation.
Yeah.
Just want to make that clear. I, on the other hand, did not choose this life. Much like Bane in the Dark Knight trilogy, I was born into the darkness.
You were born into it.
Yeah,
Molded by it.
Molded by it, yeah. And I still haven't seen the light, for anybody that's wondering, because they haven't won anything since I've been alive. I mean, I've seen highlights of the black and white 67 win on YouTube. It's really nice. Fantastic. But yeah, so here's a little backstory. So my father arrived in Canada the week of the Stanley Cup final in 1967.
Okay, yeah.
When he was staying at his uncle's house, he got to watch them win the Stanley Cup. He had no idea what that meant or what was going on.
Quite a moment in history, yeah. Lucky man.
But he got to see it. So one of the things I joke with him about is, okay, let's recreate the scenario. For an entire hockey season, go back home to Italy, and then come right back just in time for the playoffs. And let's see if that works. I still haven't sold the idea, because he's like, okay, I'll do it if the Leafs pay for my trip back and forth.
Oh,
that's probably not going to happen, so I'm not going to get that wish. So
I'm all for that idea. Whatever can get this team over the hump.
Maybe I should don't know, private message the Leaf organization and say, can we make this happen? Because, but so my dad got to see that. And as I said, so the person that he stayed with, my great uncle, was a big Leaf fan. Um, my grandfather on my mother's father, and her brothers were all Leaf fans.
Mm.
Um, so there was no way that I was going to grow up without being exposed to this team. I have one of the things I can remember, um, not 100% vividly, but certain parts are stuck in my head. I can't remember how old I was. It was before I started watching regularly, but I was my grandfather was babysitting me, and it was a Saturday night, and he was watching hockey. I think it was the Leafs versus their most hated rival, the Montreal Canadiens,
Yes.
complete with a inverted toilet seat on their chest. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I remember a back and forth discussion because I thought that Montreal was Chicago because of that aforementioned, the CH on their chest. But again, if you look at it, it looks like an inverted toilet seat. So I was convinced that it was Chicago. So he'd say, no, that's Montreal. And I'm like, no, it's Chicago. So back and forth it went. He was right. Obviously, I was wrong. But I can remember elements of that game. Don't ask me if they won. I have no recollection. I'm going to say not, just because, I mean, the law of averages is probably in my favor in saying that. But so I have that memory. Um, and then
I do want to interject since you mentioned the Canadians. There is an American company here, and they have nothing to do with hockey. And I'm not going to say the name because I don't want to disparage anyone on the 1 in a million chance that someone would actually listen to this podcast from the company. But there's a company that has a similar logo and they have a similar color scheme. And every time I see one of their trucks ride by, I get mad. And they have
oh,
nothing to do with it, but I'm just like, Canadians are,
you start booing at the truck, do you? Okay, good. So I started watching in the 92-93 season. Um,
So that's when the abusive relationship began, right?
that's when the extremely abusive relationship between me and the Toronto Maple Leafs began. Uh, that year, they made it to the conference final, which is the third round of the playoffs,
Mm.
to the seventh game. And due to a missed high stick on Doug Gilmour by Wayne Gretzky, this was a game six. But anyway, the Leafs were leading. There was no penalty. The Leaf player, Doug Gilmour, was bleeding. LA tied the game, and then Wayne Gretzky was on the ice in overtime when he should have been in the penalty box, and won game six, and then they came back and won game seven in Toronto. Sound familiar? We'll get to that. Anyway,
Yeah.
So
Seems to be a recurring pattern here.
the reason why that year was interesting and why, see, every time the Leafs lose in the playoffs, I get somebody, whether it be on the internet or wherever, well, why don't you just watch a different team? That's the usual recourse I get. Here's the problem. This franchise is more than just a sports team for me. It has connections to my family. That playoff season, that summer, my grandfather passed away.
Mm.
And watching that team in the playoff run was a distraction, but as they were playing and I was watching, it was like I still had my grandfather present, watching with me.
Mm.
So when they lost, the fact that they lost was sad, but there was an added sadness to it because, I felt like that connection, at least temporarily, was gone until next season. And then, so every time I watch this team, whether it's regular season or playoffs, I kind of get a sense that, my great uncle, my grandfather, all the family members that love this team, when I'm watching, are in a way right there with me and watching with me. So it's not as simple as, well, just switch teams. I can't do it. And people tell me, well, when they're losing, don't watch. Again, if it's on the television and I'm around the television, I can't turn it off.
People who say things like that really don't understand hardcore sports fans. Once a team gets in your blood, you can't just root for somebody else. They are part of you. They're part of your identity.
So again, I just want to underscore that this team is more than just sports for me. So that's what it is. And
I've heard that a lot. I thought, from what I hear from Canadian fans, that the Leafs fandom has been passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah. And so it means a lot. And that is my sort of history with this team. For better or worse, I will be cheering for them as long as I'm on this earth. Hopefully at some point in that time frame, they'll win a Stanley Cup. Listen, I'm not asking for a dynasty. I'm not asking for 3 or 4. I mean, that would be nice in a row. But I'm not asking for that. I just want one.
Just one. I would like just one time let them lift the cup.
There are 3 things that I'm really excited, that I would really love. As a fan of things that I would really love. So, one is a proper world's finest movie with Batman and Superman.
Okay.
Where they're not trying to kill, and again, this is in no particular order. Where they're not trying to kill each other for 3/4 of the movie. 2 is for Margot Robbie to come to her senses and leave her husband and come to me.
If somebody would have given me $100 and say, what is he going to say? I would say, okay, of the 3 things and the one not involving the Leafs, one of them is going to involve Margot Robbie.
So, that would be number 2, hypothetically number 2. She leaves her husband and realizes that I'm the one for her and comes along my way. And listen, I will vote this one over the other 2. I just want one Leaf Stanley Cup in my lifetime. That's all. Yeah. So, Branch Living, James Gunn, one of those 2, because I know I'm not getting the Margot Robbie one. As much as, if I do, then the world is going to end as soon as she knocks on my door. But that's with you. Realistically, I know that one's not happening. So, Branch Living, James Gunn, one of the other 2 is up to you. Do it with what you will. So there it is. That's my history with the team.
What's funny is that when you and I met, we could give you a little bit of backstory here about how Adam and I hooked up as co-hosts. Obviously, we co-host comic book related podcasts usually. And when he and I hooked up, it was due to Green Lantern. And I remember us talking and you told me I hadn't seen a lot of your page. And so you were talking about being from Canada and liking hockey. And I was like, oh man, please don't let him be like a Canadians fan or something like that. I'm not going to be able to deal with this. And I remember you saying, you're like, yeah, I'm a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I was like, this is going to blow his mind when I tell him.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that's the last thing you expected is for somebody to beat from the South in America.
Yeah, we're going to talk Green Lantern and superheroes, and that'll be that, and that's a wide enough breadth of things to bond over. But then we had the Leafs. So that is our origin stories, both of our origin stories with the Leafs. So what we're going to do now is take a quick break, and then on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about the season that was, the playoff run that was, because it's part of the season, and then what the Leafs should do and what we hope they do, and going into next season. So we're going to take a quick break, and then on the other side, we'll come back and talk some more Leafs. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Don't go anywhere.
What's up, Leafs Nation? If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe to this channel Adam and I would appreciate your support. And now, back to the show.
And we're back.
Indeed, we are. And it's time to look back at the 2024-2025 Toronto Maple Leaf season. Look, overall, it was an improvement as a season as the whole goes. I think Brad Treliving last offseason upgraded, and then in the trade deadline, upgraded our defense significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Tanev was fantastic. Physical stay-at-home defenseman, blocks shots like it's just another for him. Blocking a shot is like breathing, I assume. Bringing in former Boston Bruin Brandon Carlo at the trade deadline was another solid move. I really I liked our goaltending tandem in the sense of Anthony Stolarz and Joseph Wall.
Stolarz quickly became one of my favorite players.
Yeah,
showed a lot of toughness this year.
And look, Wall is good. Wall is, I love Wall as well. I just feel that of the two, the Leafs played a more stable, calmer brand of hockey in front of him, in front of Stolarz, than they did with Wall. And a lot of it has to do with his overall size and just his positioning. He always seems to be in the right spot. He's always composed. So I think our goaltending is good. I think our defense is solid. And look, when you have a season in which you win your division,
mm-hmm.
you cannot say that wasn't a good season.
I don't think there's no doubt about that. The end may be painful, but the ride this year was very enjoyable until the very end.
And Austin Matthews, yes, had a dip in production in terms of goal scoring, but I don't care who you are, you're not going to score 69 goals every season. Again, he was going through an injury. But what I love about Austin Matthews is that, yes, he's an offensively gifted scorer, but he backchecks and plays defense as well. He's very conscientious of his two-way game. He penalty kills. He's on the power play. So when you're playing a two-way game and you're being asked to at the same time score goals, but also defend against some of the other team's best players, especially as it happened in the playoffs, your goal production is probably going to go down a bit. And then add a nagging injury on top of that. So I'm good with Austin Matthews. I think his first year as captain was really solid. To me, John Tavares was a surprise. He is aging. Mind you, he's 33, so he's still younger than me, but in hockey terms, it's aging. But what did he have? 36, 37 goals, something along those lines?
Let me interject here, too. Austin Matthews is directly in the middle of what I think most hockey experts would consider the prime of a player, is about 25 to 30.
Yeah.
So hopefully, and Austin Matthews seems to be a very, elite type of athlete. And so I'm hoping as a generational player, maybe 3 or 4 more years of what we can consider that prime. Hopefully the Leafs can use what he has, and hopefully he's healthier next year going into the playoffs, and the Leafs have a little bit better luck when it comes to that. Yeah. But we do have to make the most of what we have over the next 2 to 4 years with Matthews.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter, how often you exercise and how good your diet is or whatever. Father Time's undefeated.
Right. Yeah.
I really want a championship for Austin Matthews. He's one of my favorites.
And speaking of Father Time, as I was saying, John Tavares, he had a great season. When a lot of people thought he would trail off, but he didn't. He actually, had one of his better seasons. His contract is up. I'd like them to re-sign him. But again, the price has to be right. And then, so we'll see how that goes. I liked the bringing in of Max Pacioretty, who's another guy on the older side. But I thought he was very physical. In the playoffs, he chipped in with goals that, who expected that? And there's talk that he wasn't sure. I remember in the exit interviews, he wasn't sure if he was going to come back, but there's been rumor recently that he's leaning towards coming back to Toronto because the team is very keen on bringing him back, and I would welcome that. So now I'm going to talk about. Okay, now let's transition to the playoff. Before I talk about the Mitch Marner situation, because that's going to get testy.
Okay.
The playoffs. Look, winning the division got us the opportunity to play the Ottawa Senators, the Battle of Ontario. Now, the previous battles of Ontario in 2004. Up to from I think it was 90 from 2000 to 2004 or whatever it was. The way the script would go is Ottawa would hand us our rear end in the regular season, and then we'd end up beating them in the playoffs. Same thing happened here. This past season, Ottawa swept us in the regular season, and we beat them in 6 in the playoffs. I don't want to be
a lot of people. A lot of American sports writers here were predicting the Senators to win that series.
Well, they're stupid, but anyways. Look,
a few of those.
Everybody and their mother knew that. I don't want to sound overconfident, but I expected the Leafs to beat the Ottawa Senators. Like if they hadn't, then I would be having a very different reaction up until this point on the podcast. But I'm not. So
you and I talked about a lot of times recently, the Leafs have kind of limped into the playoffs, not playing their best hockey, and losing close games, losing games in overtime. This year, you and I agreed that the coaching seemed to be that factor that got them to win games that they previously would not have won. I was more optimistic this year going into the playoffs than I had any of the previous 11 years.
Agreed. As I was like, now look, even though I expected Ottawa or to beat Ottawa, I employ I'm very superstitious when it comes to the Leafs, especially when it comes to playoff time. So, logic, statistics. You can tell me that I'm insane, and maybe that is partially true. But here are some of the good luck things that I think helped the Leafs this season. You see this bracelet? My niece made this for me. My 8-year-old niece made this for me last summer, and she said, "When the Leafs play, wear it. Every game, wear it." And I did, and they won the division. Made it to the second round. We'll get to it, but came within a game of going to the third round. But so this bracelet was, I think a good luck charm. I think it served its purpose.
I like it.
Also, I had a friend who, I guess, hearing me talk about hockey enough, he happened to tune into a game. She had never watched it before, and I remember that game. It was against the Calgary Flames. It was on Amazon Prime, and the Leafs destroyed Calgary that game. And she had told me that she had tuned into the game. She didn't watch the whole game, but she watched part of it. So I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, the Leafs won big. You're going to have to make this a semi-regular thing. Because I want to see if there's a correlation between what just happened there and you watch the game.
You got to bring the luck.
So she did, and through that course of the situation, the Leafs had won, I think, 5 or 6 in a row. They clinched their division. So I'm like, wait a minute, there might be some good look mojo here. I'm like, okay, we're going to extend this into the playoffs and see how it goes. And she got into it. She has herself a Leafs t-shirt now and the whole 9 yards. And listen, look, the end result was not what you or I wanted, but as she was watching the playoffs, and she said she watched every game of the playoffs, the Leafs won 7 games this year in the playoffs and lost 6. I mean, that's a winning record.
Yeah.
That's an improvement over other years. So now I'm going to extrapolate this over the course of the season and see how her good luck charm capabilities work, over the course of the next season. But that's something I take stock in as well. Now, again, I will keep her name out of it because I felt bad because she got really into it as the playoffs were going on. And she was legitimately upset when they lost and sad. So I feel bad that I partially caused that pain. So I'm just going to leave it there. But it's all, like I take these good luck things into account, and the bracelet worked. She was very helpful to the Leafs, so I hope those 2 things continue into next season. But the frustrating thing is, again, was the second round with Florida, where the Leafs won the first 2 games. And had 2 2-goal leads in game 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then pressure started to come.
Yeah.
And the Leafs reverted back to old bad habits. Ended up losing game 3 in overtime.
That really was the pivot moment. You posted, I think it was a screen cap on one social media site, maybe it was Facebook, but when they had that 3-1 lead,
yeah,
and it was what, late in the second period, I
there was
believe.
15 minutes left in the second, so plenty of time, but still, it's a 3-1 lead.
Yeah, but 3-1 lead, and what could have been a 3-0 lead, becomes a momentum swinging comeback for the Panthers. And that I remember having a very foreboding feeling after that game, being a Leafs fan and seeing them lose in heartbreaking fashion so many times. I was like, is this going to be the thing that turns around the series? And unfortunately it was.
Yeah, and so, like, here's the disappointing part. The series after that overtime loss is still 2-1. Then they tied the series because they're on home ice for game 4 as well, so they 2-2. But you're going home for game 5. This is the benefit of winning your division, is you get home ice advantage. And game 5, the Leafs shit the bed. That's the best way you can describe it. And what was it? 5-1, 6-1? I think it was 6-1. The effort was horrendous. So they're down 3-2 going into game 6. Because, the Leafs, just when you think they're done, and just when you think, okay, I've had enough of this team, they pull you. It's like The Godfather, but what is it, part 3? I thought I was out, and they pull me back in. Comes game 6, they play one of the best games of the season, of the series. They win 2-0. Austin Matthews scores a big goal. Max Pacioretty gets the insurance. And they shut out the Panthers in game 6. And they're going home for game 7. And so I talked to my friend who I said was the good luck charm. She was excited. She's like, oh, look how good, again, relatively brand new to hockey. Look how good they played. They shut them out. Like, they're not going to go home and repeat what they did in game 5. No, listen, this is my fault. Adam knows better because Adam's been watching this nonsense since 1992-93. But listen. We see again when you interact with a new fan, you get swept up in their optimism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, you know what? Maybe she's right. They're not gonna have another stinker on home ice. This team's different. Can do this.
Speaking of different, the Leafs in Game 6, if you didn't know anything about hockey or sports in general, to see them in Game 6 and then compare that to Game 5 and 7,
Yeah.
they look like two different teams.
Yeah. It's like they're like Two-Face. They flip the coin and let's see what we got. So again, going into Game 7, I'm still nervous, but hey, she's optimistic. I got the bracelet on. They've proven they're a different team. The way they came back and beat Ottawa, the way they've battled with Florida for most of the series. Game 5 was a little blip in the radar. They can still do this, but you're still nervous because it's Game 7. But I had belief, as you know, as this podcast, part of the name of the podcast. Then the Leafs proceed to do what they've done for basically in modern times since 2013, their first time against Boston, when they had the 4-1 lead halfway through the third period.
Yes.
And
even though that was before my fandom began, I went back and watched that series, and that agonizing loss. And the thing is that, like I said, I see a pattern from from then until now. Despite all the changeover with players, the Leafs still have that unfortunate luck. And again, I don't actually believe in magic and things like that. But if I did believe in curses, this would be the organization I'd say, yeah, they're cursed.
So now, after seeing that, you can't tell me that you're different. Like, I don't want to hear the excuses from the players. Oh, we're different. No, you're not. Because here's my issue. The core four, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, O'Reilly, it's been a 9-year exercise. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They've made the playoffs, every one of those, 8, this will be the ninth, would have been the 19th year. So the 8 years in a row, the same result, right? A couple second round appearances, but otherwise, first round exit, second round exit, whatever. And it's typically a game, they force a Game 7 and then front line. So, sure.
I did not expect a 6-1 loss. That 3-goal spurt.
Look,
it took all of the energy out of the building.
Had they lost, let's say 3-2 in overtime, wouldn't I have been upset? Would I have been sad? Yeah. But at least I could have held my head and said, hey, listen, both teams were going, both teams give it their all. Just, so one team's got to win, right? It just so happens that but it was the way they lost and the effort that really upset me.
Yeah. So
now, because of that loss, we cannot, a popular thing on social media is, for the last few years, run it back. They'll learn from their mistakes. There is no more running it back. This core four is not coming back. Mitch Marner is on his way out. Tavares remains to be seen if we can get a reasonable deal done. Now here's where my issue comes in, is Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner, homegrown, grew up a fan of this franchise since he was a little boy. Was interviewed when he was like 5 or 6 when he played Timbit hockey. Asked, what team would you like to play for if you make the NHL? And he says, Toronto Maple Leafs. Isn't that nice? So they draft him. He plays his entry-level contract, and he's due for a new contract. And his team is threatening to hold out and potentially play in Switzerland unless he gets the deal that he wants. So the Kyle Dubas at the time, that was our GM, opens up the checkbook, gives him no move clause, gives him the amount he wants, which is 10.893 million per year. And you know why it's 10.893? Because 93 was his junior number, and he had to have the junior number in there. So Kyle Dubas gets his blank checkbook, says, "Sure, here you go. Let's not create an entitled environment of overgrown babies who get what they want and then expect something different." Well, so we gave it to him. But hey, listen, Matthews, Nylander, Marner, now Tavares. Don't worry, they're going to figure this thing out. In 9 years, they haven't figured it out, folks.
Right.
So now, and the best part is, you know, at the end of last, or the story goes, according to the situation, that last season, at the beginning, before this season started, the Leafs offered Mitch Marner what would have been the highest paid contract the franchise has ever given to any player. Mitch Marner refused and said he doesn't want to negotiate during the season. Which, listen, our head office was a bunch of idiots and gave him all these concessions. So that's his right to say, hey, listen, I don't want to negotiate during the season. But if I offer somebody the highest offer the franchise has ever given and he turns it down, that to me says, this guy doesn't want to be here, right? So then comes the trade deadline, right? Gearing up for the playoffs. The Leafs get an offer from Carolina for Mikko Rantanen, who's won a Stanley Cup, has had multiple 100-point seasons. And part of the deal was Rantanen for Mitch Marner. But so they had an apparent framework for a deal worked out. But because Mitch Marner has that fantastic no trade, no movement clause, isn't it nice? So the Leafs now have to go to Mitch Marner and say, look, we have a deal in place. Would you like to go to Carolina? And he says, no, thank you. So the Leafs don't get Mikko Rantanen. Mikko Rantanen, granted, Dallas didn't win the Stanley Cup, but you know who had a hell of a lot more points than Mitch Marner did in the playoffs? Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah.
And here's the best part. Mikko Rantanen said that one of the teams he was willing to sign an extension for when he got traded was the Toronto Maple Leafs. So thank you, Mitch Marner. Thank you for absolutely nothing. And now, here's the best part. Now, apparently his team has informed the Leafs that he's going to explore free agency. But here's the best part, Donnie. Listen to this. Mitch Marner is going to be gracious enough, if the Leafs want, to give the Leafs a meeting. So we could potentially offer him a crap ton of money that we already offered him before. This is a guy who reports indicate that he wants north of $14 million per year on his next contract. It's 14 million American dollars, not Canadian dollars, American dollars. Now, first of all, if I'm the Leafs, I cannot pay this man 14 or 14 plus million dollars because Matthews, our captain, and 2 times 60 plus goal scorer makes 13 and a half, I believe. Did Marner get a 100-point season this year? Yes. He got 102 points, I think. Here's my question. Answer this honestly, Donnie. 102 points, right? That Marner got. Fantastic individual achievement. What did it do for the Leafs in the playoffs?
Didn't hear his name very often, did we?
No. In fact, in Game 7, when the Leafs were in the process of having a diarrhea on the ice for 60 minutes, there was a commercial break, and over the break, you see Marner wiping his forehead that had no sweat on it at all, considering he was playing a hockey game. Hair flowing in the wind because he had his helmet off. And he's telling his teammates on the bench to wake the F up. Notice I didn't say, I'm really trying here, folks, but something's... So you guys are going to learn something high in a second. But you're telling your teammates to wake the F up in Game 7? What have you done to earn the right to do that? Now, if Max Domi had come over to the bench after just scoring the goal to make it 3-1, and did that, listen, he's got every right to because he just scored. Right? If Joseph Wall came over to the bench during the timeout and said, "Guys, you want to help me out? Like, do something," I respect that because Wall is by himself. He's on an island. He's like Tom Hanks in that movie Cast Away with the ball. That was Joseph Wall. So I'm gonna respect Wall.
And Wall, there was way too much traffic in front of the net constantly with Wall. I mean, for him to stop that barrage of shots, I felt really bad for him.
But
go ahead.
For Mitch Marner to say that when you have done nothing and your career in games 5 through 7 is a big whopping 0, I'm sorry. There is no way on earth that I would, if I was the GM of the Leafs, that I would entertain paying this guy $14 or $14+ million a year. No, Robbie could, if I was the GM of the Leafs, could come and grab my hand and try to get me to sign that contract, and it wouldn't happen. That's how much I would refuse Margot Robbie. That's how much the willpower it takes for me to do that. It wouldn't happen. Okay, so and apparently Mitch Marner is not going to decide on July 1st when free agency opens who he's going to go to. He's going to take meetings with various teams and then make a decision. Again, to which I say, you've had one 100-point season. You haven't won a cup. You haven't been a contributor in the playoffs to your team's success. What mentality do you have? Do you think you've earned the right to have meetings? Who are you, Don Corleone? Here's what I have to say to Mitch Marner. Take your well-coiffed hair with no sweat on it in a Game 7. Take your little dog that you like playing driveway hockey with on Instagram during the playoffs that you posted after we lost the game, and take what the sucker team is going to offer you $14 to $14.5 million. And here's the Italian word of the day, folks. You can take all that stuff and vaffanculo. And I'm not telling you what it means. I'm going to let you all search it. And here's how to spell it. Vaffanculo. There's your word of the day. Look it up, Google it, and you'll know exactly what I said to him. That's what I think of.
I know whenever the Leafs lose, I'm going to see that word from you on social media somewhere.
So that's what I think of Mitch Marner. Okay? And everybody crying about how do you replace a 100-point player? What are we going to do? Here's an idea. I'll take 3 or 4 players that can get 40 to 60 points and then can contribute in the regular season and can contribute in the playoffs over one guy that gets 100 points and then does nothing in the playoffs. I don't know about you, Donnie, but what do you think? What's your thought on that?
Well, I tell you, the general consensus from what I'm reading is that he's gone, but at the same time, I'm reading that there aren't a lot of teams out there willing to deal with that particular number that he's talking about. So I'm like, exactly where is he going to go? And is it going to be a situation to where the Leafs have to have him here because he prices himself out and he doesn't get what he wants? And is that going to create a situation where he has a negative effect on the organization? And listen, look, the guy's had some great moments. We're not saying that.
Yeah.
But at this point, the crazy thing to do is the same thing over and over and expect a different result.
Yeah.
Obviously, something has to change at this point for them to get past the Panthers, for them to go deep into the playoffs and make a Stanley Cup run. And it seems like all signs point to Marner.
He'll get that from some team, whether it maybe one of the California teams, or that has the cap room, or Carolina is rumored to be getting ready to make a big offer for him. But we'll see. But what I'd like the Leafs to do in the offseason, here's what I like, and I never thought I'd say this.
Okay.
So, first of all, re-sign Pacioretty. I liked him. He was great for us, especially the playoffs. If you can get Tavares, if the monetary situation is right, I'd bring him back, right?
I certainly hope that's the case. Yes.
Definitely, they got to get Nice. He's a restricted free agent, so he's not going anywhere. But get him a new contract because he's a key cog to the future, Matthew Nice. So all that. But in terms of bringing in players, there's speculation and talk that the Leafs are going to make a heavy play for Brad Marchand,
Mm-hmm.
who was a long time Boston Bruin and a nemesis, and then he went to Florida and became a nemesis again. Now, if you would ask me last year, 2 years ago, do you want the Leafs to bring in Brad Marchand? Well, I would have said to you then, absolutely not. I don't want to see this guy on my team. No. Listen, Brad Tree Living, here I am talking about be wise with your money in regards to Mitch Marner and all that nonsense. But I'm going to tell you something right now, Brad. If you're listening, you're probably not, but on the off chance you are. Remember that blank check that Dubas opened up for Marner? He opened that up for Brad Marchand.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I almost dry heaved in my mouth as I said that. Look, worst case scenario, if we signed him, let's say he didn't have a good year, at least we wouldn't have to deal with playoffs. He wouldn't be harming us.
I will say that I got some and when I say local, obviously I'm not in the same state, but there is some coverage here. Supposedly at one of the Panthers' celebratory nights or whatever, they were at some club and he announced he like got on the mic and like screamed to the crowd, "I'm not leaving." So it may be a very difficult thing to get him to come here, but yes, the old saying, money changes everything.
I mean, can we get the $1 million man involved and see if we can, and see if we can't, wrangle that? So, look, I don't know. I'm not sure who the Leafs targets are aside from Marchand and
Yeah.
what have you. All I know is they have to get. They improved. They were a grittier team this season. They need to get a little bit more grittier. But it's not grit in the sense of, well, you're just going to go out there and smash people into the boards and then have no skill. Like you need.
Right.
We need to look at what the Panthers were able to do and the way they played in terms of constantly pressuring,
Right.
being
Exactly.
physical. But then once you get the puck back, having enough skill to be able to put it in the net.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
but
To clear out and get the good shots. At the same time, you don't want to lower yourself and do things like, hit the goalie in the side of the head and give him a concussion with your glove.
Absolutely not. Of course, we don't want to get to that. Because here's the thing.
That's why I was so angry when I saw the replay, like the opposite angle, and I saw that go into Stolar's the side of his head.
And that was on purpose. You can tell me until you're blue in the face that it wasn't, but it was.
And look, I'm not going to say, the Leafs had plenty of chances after that to still secure this series, but
they just didn't do it.
It's certainly, to do that, it disrespects the game,
So,
and that was a terrible thing to do. And from what we know about concussions, when I heard that Stolarz was at the hospital and he was throwing up, that's very worrisome.
Yeah, that's that's not a good situation.
And I still think the league should have done more about that, but
exactly. But
over and done now.
Yeah, nothing you can do about it now. But what I'm saying is emulate the way the Panthers, the forecheck, the pressure, the constant, the constant relentless pressure that they. That's what we need to get to more of.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know who they're going to. I know Brad Marchand's a target. I know there's been talk about Aaron Ekblad, the defender on Florida, that they consider bringing in. But to me, not having Marner's $10.893 million off the books is going to help you bring in. You can get one or two good players as opposed to just betting the farm on one guy, right? So it's going to be an interesting offseason for sure to see how the Leafs revamp the team a little bit, because Brad Treliving in his exit interview for the season did say the DNA of this team is going to change a little bit. So,
well, again, I think it's obvious at this point. They have been trying similar things with similar lineups, and so the roster just has to change for them to make the most of some of the other talent that they have.
And we do have a prospect that, just finished his junior career. He's no longer junior eligible, which is Easton Cowan, who is very much, he's got not exactly the same, but a similar kind of skill, at least junior numbers wise, to Mitch Marner. But he's a little bit more tenacious, more physical. He's a small guy, but he's like a little pit bull. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he's either going to make the Leafs or the Marlies this coming season. So we'll see how he fits in. The interesting thing with him is that if he does make the Leafs, I would like to see them give him a good 20-game run, 15 to 20-game run in the top six, the top two lines, because you can't put a player like that with that much innate skill on a third or fourth line and say, okay, do what you did now. Go, do what you do and try and emulate that and on the third or fourth line, because when you're on the third or fourth line, you're not playing with as gifted playmakers.
Right.
So when you have a guy with skill like that, you have to give him a chance in the top six to see what he has and to see if he's ready for the NHL. So I hope they do that with him. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he makes the NHL roster right out of the gate. But it's going to be an interesting offseason because I think that the defense is pretty much in a good place. Would I take Aaron Ekblad? Of course. On defense, so I would still make an improvement there. I think the goaltending tandem is, that's not going to get touched. It's just going to be the forward group.
It definitely shouldn't. So
yeah, it's just going to be the forward group that gets an adjustment. And again,
and that's another thing I like about having a friend like you who's up near, the very close to the Leafs up there. That I can get news from you that I don't get down here.
I read a stat for everybody that's worried about losing Mitch Marner. I read a stat that since 2021, when Mitch Marner has been out of the lineup, the Leafs have a record of, I believe it was 18-6-2. They're capable of winning games without Mitch Marner. Will there may be a little bit of a step back because you are taking a 100-point player off the roster? Sure. Does that mean that all of a sudden we're going to miss the playoffs? No. I mean, could disaster strike and that happen? I mean, sure, but knock on wood, it doesn't. But just by losing Mitch Marner does not mean, okay, well, now by default we're going to miss the playoffs. So all these people overreacting. I mean, look, anybody with a little bit of foresight, once he declared he wasn't going to negotiate during the season, the writing was on the wall that he is gone. So we have to adjust to a Mitch Marner-less Leaf team. The era of the core four is now done. And after 9 years, I think it's time.
Well, I think that's a consensus among all Leafs fans is that you can't simply keep running it back. You've got to try something different eventually. And this year, like I said, I think for a lot of Leafs fans, our hopes were higher going into the playoffs this year because the Leafs not only won the division, but they seemed to be clicking on all cylinders. And then we saw the same problems that we've seen in the past.
Yeah,
especially in the second series against the Panthers. And so at some point, it's a hard profession, and at the pro level, and sometimes you have to make those hard calls. And obviously, at this point, the Leafs they have a missing ingredient. Can we find that to get to the Stanley Cup?
So it's going to be an interesting offseason, and look forward to what they're going to do. So just before we wrap this up, Donnie, what I think we're going to do is we'll reconvene again after the Leafs make their first couple of moves. So once we see a couple of signings, Donnie and I'll come on and do a quick recording. I'll break them down. If Donnie's not familiar with the player, I'll give him kind of a heads up. And we'll talk about a couple of the moves they made, right? So that'll be some point after July 1st when free agency opens and the Leafs start doing things. And then throughout the course of the season, of course, we'll do an episode for the start of the season, the regular season in October. So maybe the first week of the season, we'll do a podcast to wrap up the first week, and then we'll play it by ear. And every so often we'll come on and do a
and just see how the team is progressing throughout the year,
throughout the course of the year, and then the playoffs. Provided we're there again, not on it'll be more intense and more frequent. So you're gonna get a lot more Leaf content here. Hopefully, you're looking forward to it. But in the meantime, Donnie, I hope you're excited to go on this journey with me. I'm excited to have this one in the bag and then get going as the off season progresses. But this was fun. I was able to get some frustration out. It's still a little bit is still there, but again.
Like I said, I'm glad to be able to talk about this with somebody because again, I've run into a few hockey fans in my life, but not Leafs fans, and so I do have a friend, and this comparison is often made: the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I have a friend who's a fan of the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh God! Yeah.
The Cowboys have a very similar reputation of having great regular seasons and then laying an egg in the playoffs. And so he listened to me and he commiserated with me a little bit when the Leafs fell short of their goal again. But again, this was also therapeutic for me to be able to come on and talk about my disappointment because I had such high hopes.
So we will be back for more Leafs talk in the very near future. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, Donnie, if people want to talk to you about the Leafs, because hopefully this will bring more Leafs fans to your social media. So where can they talk to you about the Leafs?
You can find me on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, and I am under the name Emerald Enthusiast, which obviously has nothing to do with hockey. That has to do with comic books, but I'm more than happy to talk with other Leafs fans and connect with other Leafs fans. Any of those places you find me, you see the name Emerald Enthusiast, that's me. You'll find that on numerous places online.
Yeah, I'll put the links in the description, at least one or two of them. But on a side note, the Leafs do wear green for St. Patrick's Day games. So
right, the same Pats, right?
Yeah, they wear the same Pats. So it's kind of it all comes together.
Gotta show you my shirt. I've been looking for something kind of light to wear.
The
hotter temperature. So
now we have to record a Batman podcast in a bit. So I wore a Batman top. Plus it's black and I'm still in mourning. So it is what it is. But if you want to talk to me about the Leafs, or hear me rant about the Leafs, or either of the two, I am on X or Twitter, whatever it's called, at Adam_LeafsFan. I'm also on Blue Sky. I'll put those links in the description. I'm on Instagram. I'll figure out how to put that in the description too. But until next time, remember that being a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs is forever. From the first time they disappoint you in a Game 7 loss to the last. So long, everybody.
Go Leafs, go!